I can't breathe. The sand is in my mouth, my eyes, every pore of my skin. It's 3 a.m. in the Zagros Mountains, and I'm lying in a dried riverbed with 5 dead men around me, except they're not dead yet, and neither am I, though we should be. 147 enemy soldiers have us surrounded in a half-mile perimeter, and they're closing in. I can hear their boots crunching on rocks, their radios crackling in Farsi. My radio is smashed. Our extraction bird went down 6 hours ago. We have 17 rounds of ammunition left between the 6 of us, and 18 hours until the backup extraction window opens. If we survive that long, if anyone even knows we're still alive. My name is Daniel Rourke, and I'm about to do something so disturbing, so psychologically brutal, that the United States government will classify this mission for 36 years. Not because it failed, because it worked too well. Because what I'm about to unleash on these soldiers will haunt them for the rest of their lives, and it will haunt me too. My hand is on a device that shouldn't exist in any military manual. My commander's last words before he died were, "Don't you dare." But he's gone now, his blood still warm on my hands, and I'm the ranking soldier in a hole in the earth with death closing in from every direction. The temperature is dropping. 42 degrees. In 6 hours it'll be below freezing. We have no shelter, no fire, no hope. But I have this device, and I have a memory from my childhood in rural Kentucky that every military psychologist said would never work in combat. They were wrong. I know they were wrong because I tested it once, just once, during a training exercise in North Carolina, and 3 instructors quit the next day. What I'm about to do will save 5 lives and shatter hundreds of minds. The enemy will call it the Night of Screaming Ghosts. Their soldiers will refuse to patrol this valley ever again. Some will desert. 2 will take their own lives within a month. And I'll carry this secret until I'm 58 years old, sitting in my kitchen in Montana, finally cleared to tell you what really happened in those 18 hours. If my story resonates with you, please hit the like button to bring a little light to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the country or world you're listening from. They told us it would be a simple operation, 48 hours in, 48 hours out. Destroy the communications relay hidden in the Zagros Mountains, photograph the facility, extract before sunrise, clean, surgical, invisible. I was 22 years old, a staff sergeant in a unit that doesn't officially exist, leading a team into terrain that made Afghanistan look like a parking lot. This was November 1989. The Cold War was ending, but nobody told the people shooting at us. We were there to blind a network that stretched from Tehran to Baghdad, a facility so secret that even satellite imagery showed nothing but empty mountains. 6 of us went in. The mission brief said we'd face minimal resistance. Maybe a dozen guards, poorly trained, poorly equipped. They lied, or intelligence failed. Doesn't matter which. What matters is that when we hit that facility at 2 a.m., we found ourselves walking into a hornet's nest. It wasn't a small relay station. It was a command center with rotating guard shifts, hidden bunkers, and a full company of Republican Guard soldiers rotating through every 6 hours. We completed the primary objective. Those charges went off exactly as planned, turning their communications hub into rubble. But the explosions woke up every soldier within 5 miles. Our extraction helicopter took an RPG to the tail rotor 3 minutes before pickup. I watched it spin out of the sky, trailing fire, disappearing behind a ridge. The pilot's last transmission was telling us to get to the secondary extraction point, 18 hours away on foot, through enemy territory, with every soldier in the region now hunting us. I grew up in Harlan County, Kentucky, in a hollow so remote that our nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. My father worked in the coal mines until black lung took him when I was 15. My mother raised me and my 2 sisters on a small tobacco farm that barely produced enough to keep us fed. We didn't have electricity until I was 12. We had kerosene lamps, a wood stove, and long dark nights where the only sounds were wind through pine trees and animals moving through the woods. And sometimes, on certain nights, my grandfather would take me into those woods and teach me things that his grandfather taught him. Old mountain knowledge, things that sound like superstition until you understand the psychology behind them. One of those things was about fear, about how fear spreads through sound, how the human brain interprets certain frequencies as danger, how you could use voice and rhythm to make men believe they were hearing things that weren't there. My grandfather used it to keep poachers off our land. He called it calling the haints, making ghost sounds that would send grown men running. I thought it was just folklore, just old mountain magic, until I studied psychology in the army and learned about infrasound, about frequency manipulation, about how the human ear processes terror. When I joined Special Forces, I brought a small piece of equipment with me, something I built in my barracks using radio parts and a speaker salvaged from a broken PA system. It could produce sounds at frequencies that human ears barely register consciously, but that the primitive brain interprets as immediate danger. Subsonic frequencies mixed with randomized patterns that mimic predator calls, infant distress signals, death screams. I tested it only once during a training exercise. 3 veteran instructors with combat experience in Vietnam broke formation and ran. 1 vomited, another refused to talk about it. The 3rd requested a transfer. My commanding officer confiscated the device and told me if I ever used it again, I'd face court-martial. I rebuilt it, smaller, better, and I carried it on every mission, hidden in my pack, because some part of me knew that one day I'd need something that military doctrine didn't account for. One day I'd need to fight with something other than bullets. That day came in a dried riverbed in the Zagros Mountains, with 5 men depending on me and death closing in from every direction. The first 2 hours after the helicopter went down, we moved fast. Staff Sergeant Mike Chen from Sacramento, Corporal James Washington from Detroit, Specialist Rodriguez from El Paso, Private First Class Tommy O'Brien from Boston, and Corporal David Mills from Atlanta. These were my brothers, my responsibility. We humped through terrain that shredded our boots, over rocks that cut through our gloves, staying in the low ground, avoiding ridgelines where we'd be silhouetted against the stars. We could hear them behind us. Vehicles, radios, dogs. They weren't just searching, they were herding us, pushing us away from the extraction point toward rougher terrain where they could box us in. At 4 a.m., we took cover in a ravine to check our situation. Chen did a quick inventory. We had 17 magazines between us, most partially spent, 4 grenades, 2 smoke markers, 1 flare gun with 3 shells, no long-range radio. That went down with the helicopter. How short-range radios might reach 5 miles in this terrain, maybe less. The secondary extraction point was 23 miles northeast. We had no food except the emergency rations in our packs, maybe 200 calories each. We had water for another day if we rationed carefully. Mills had taken shrapnel in his left shoulder from the explosion. Washington's ankle was badly sprained from a fall during our initial escape. Rodriguez was coughing. He'd inhaled smoke and dust, and every breath sounded wet and painful. O'Brien and Chen were in the best shape, but exhaustion was setting in for all of us. We'd been operational for 16 hours already, and the adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind the shakes and the cold clarity that comes when you realize how badly things have gone wrong. We moved again at first light, using the dawn to make distance while they were changing shifts, reorganizing their search. We made it another 4 miles before we heard the helicopters, 2 of them, old Soviet Heinz, flying search patterns. We went to ground in a cluster of boulders, covering ourselves with thermal blankets and dirt, breathing through cloth to minimize heat signature. They passed over us 3 times. The 3rd time, they hovered. I could see the door gunner scanning the rocks with binoculars. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. Rodriguez had his hand over his mouth, trying to suppress his coughing. 1 cough would kill us all. The helicopter moved on. But now we knew they had air assets, and that changed everything. We couldn't move in daylight anymore. We'd have to wait until nightfall, which meant staying hidden for the next 12 hours in terrain that offered almost no concealment. Chen found a small cave, more of an overhang really, barely large enough for the 6 of us. We squeezed in, sharing body heat, taking turns on watch, listening to the sound of vehicles and patrols moving past our position. They were methodical, thorough, checking every hiding spot. It was only a matter of time. At 2 p.m., Mills started shivering. Shock was setting in from his wound. The shrapnel had gone deeper than we thought, and infection was already starting despite the antibiotics from our first aid kit. His fever was climbing. Washington's ankle had swollen to twice its normal size. He could barely put weight on it. Rodriguez's coughing was getting worse. Every hour our effective fighting strength was decreasing. I made a decision. We weren't going to make it to the extraction point. Not all of us. Not in time. We needed to create a diversion. Something that would draw their forces away from our route. Something that would buy us time. But we didn't have explosives left. We didn't have ammunition to spare. We didn't have anything except rocks, cold, darkness, and the device hidden in my pack. I told them what I wanted to do. Chen thought I was crazy. Washington said it would never work. Rodriguez said even if it worked, it would bring every soldier in the valley down on us. O'Brien, the youngest, just stared at me like I'd suggested we surrender. Mills, fevered and barely conscious, said, "Do whatever it takes." I waited until nightfall. The temperature dropped to 38 degrees. I could see my breath. I could see theirs. They'd set up a perimeter around us. I could count the fires, the positions. At least 140 soldiers, maybe more, in overlapping positions that covered every avenue of escape. They knew we were in this area. They knew we couldn't have gone far. They were waiting for first light to tighten the noose. At midnight I crawled out of our hiding spot. Chen came with me. He wouldn't let me go alone. We moved slowly, carefully, staying in the shadows until we reached a rock formation about 200 yards from our position, elevated with good acoustics. The valley below was shaped like an amphitheater, perfect for sound propagation. I set up the device, positioning the speakers to bounce sound off the rock walls to create the illusion of source movement. I set the frequency mix to the pattern I'd programmed years ago, the one I'd tested once and sworn never to use. Chen looked at me. "You sure about this?" I wasn't, but I activated it anyway. The sound started low, below human hearing. A subsonic pulse at 19 hertz, the frequency that resonates with the human eyeball, that causes visual hallucinations. Then it ramped up slowly, adding layers, a grinding noise like metal on bone, a rhythmic thumping like a massive heartbeat, random spikes of infant crying, cut short, repeated, animal screams, not any specific animal, but a hybrid of sounds that the brain interprets as predator, as danger, as wrong. And then I added the human voices. I'd recorded them myself years ago in different emotional states, then processed them through filters that stripped away everything recognizable, leaving only the emotional frequency: fear, pain, desperation, rage. The sounds weren't words. They were the musical notation of human suffering, played at volumes and frequencies designed to bypass conscious thought and speak directly to the part of the brain that evolved to keep us alive by making us afraid of the dark. The effect was immediate. I could see soldiers at the nearest fire stand up, looking around, reaching for weapons. The sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the valley walls, seeming to move. Some of them started shouting, others were silent, frozen. I adjusted the pattern, adding more layers, making it crescendo and fall, never giving their brains time to adapt, to rationalize. Then one of them screamed, not in fear, in terror, pure animal terror. And that scream spread like wildfire. Within 5 minutes, half their perimeter was in chaos. Soldiers were running, some were firing at shadows, others were trying to evacuate, stumbling over rocks, falling, crawling. I could hear their officers shouting orders, but the orders were being drowned out by the sound, by the panic, by the feedback loop of fear spreading through 140 men who suddenly believed they were surrounded by something they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't understand. I ran it for 20 minutes. 20 minutes of psychological warfare that no manual describes, that no training prepares you for. When I finally shut it down, the silence was almost as disturbing as the sound had been. Chen and I crawled back to our position. The others were staring at me. Rodriguez crossed himself. O'Brien was crying quietly. Mills, delirious with fever, was mumbling about his mother. The enemy perimeter was broken. Through my night vision scope, I could see soldiers abandoning their positions, gathering in larger groups, some of them leaving entirely. They'd consolidated around their vehicles, their lights, their officers. seeking safety in numbers, invisibility. The darkness had become too dangerous. We moved. Washington on Chen's shoulder, Mills supported by Rodriguez, O'Brien on point, me covering the rear. We moved through the gaps in their perimeter, through positions they'd abandoned, past fires still burning with no one to tend them. We moved for 6 hours straight, putting distance between us and that valley, heading toward terrain too rough for vehicles, too remote for organized pursuit. At dawn we heard helicopters again, but they weren't searching. They were evacuating their own soldiers. We intercepted radio chatter, fragmented, panicked reports about an attack, about chemical weapons, about psychological warfare. They thought we were a much larger force. They thought we had capabilities we didn't have. The sound had convinced them that an entire Special Forces unit was operating in the valley, equipped with advanced weapons they couldn't counter. We reached the secondary extraction point with 3 hours to spare. The helicopter came in low and fast, didn't even fully land, just hovered while we climbed aboard. As we lifted off, I looked back at the Zagros Mountains, at the valley where I'd unleashed something that couldn't be taken back. The pilot was asking for our sitrep. Chen was giving him the basic details. Facility destroyed, 1 casualty from shrapnel, mission successful. He didn't mention what happened in those 18 hours. None of us did. Because when we landed at the forward operating base, military intelligence was already waiting. They separated us immediately, individual debriefs, detailed questions about the facility, about enemy strength, about our escape, and then questions about the reports they were receiving from enemy communications they were monitoring, reports about screaming in the darkness, about soldiers refusing to return to patrol, about a psychological attack that didn't match any known weapon system. I told them the truth. I showed them the device. I explained what I'd done and why. The intelligence officer listened without expression, took notes, and then told me something I'll never forget. "Sergeant Rourke, you will never speak about this mission again. Not to your team members, not to your family, not to anyone. This mission is now classified at a level above your clearance. The device you built is now property of the United States government. The method you used is now subject to review under the Geneva Conventions regarding psychological warfare. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood that I'd crossed a line, that I'd used something so effective and so disturbing that it scared the people on my own side. I understood that saving 5 lives came with a cost that went beyond the physical. They kept Mills in a military hospital for 2 months, treating his infection. Washington recovered from his ankle injury, but never deployed again. Medical discharge for permanent damage. Rodriguez's lungs never fully healed. He still coughs on cold days. Chen and O'Brien stayed in the service, but were reassigned to different units. We never served together again. We never talked about that night again. I stayed in Special Forces for another 6 years, but I never used sound as a weapon again. I didn't need to. That one night taught me something about the power of fear, about the responsibility that comes with understanding how to break the human mind. Every soldier I faced after that, I saw them as someone's son, someone's father, someone who might go home and wake up screaming because of something I did to them in the dark. I left the military in 1995, moved to Montana, married a woman named Sarah, who never asked about the scars I carry inside. We have 2 daughters now. I work as a hunting guide, teaching people about the woods, about respect for nature, about the sounds that mountains make at night. Sometimes clients ask me about my service. I tell them basic details, Special Forces, classified missions, saw some action. That's all they need to know. For 36 years I kept the secret. The mission stayed classified. The other members of my team kept their silence too. We had no choice. But 2 months ago, I received a letter from the Department of Defense. The mission has been declassified. The records are being released to military historians studying psychological operations during the Cold War. They want me to participate in a formal debrief, to explain the methodology, to discuss the ethical implications. And so here I am, 58 years old, finally able to tell you what happened in those 18 hours. Finally able to explain how 6 soldiers survived against impossible odds, by using a weapon that exists in the space between sound and silence, between reality and nightmare. Looking back now, I'm not sure if I made the right choice. I saved 5 lives. But I also learned that some weapons are too powerful to use, that some victories come at a cost to your own humanity. The enemy soldiers in that valley, they went home to their families, but I wonder what they took home with them. What sounds they still hear in the quiet moments. What fears they can't explain. War is full of terrible choices. You can fight with honor and watch your brothers die, or you can use every tool available and live with the weight of what you've done. I chose to live. I chose to bring my team home, and I've spent 36 years wondering if that makes me a hero or just another person who learned how to weaponize human fear. If I could tell you one thing, it's this. The most dangerous weapons aren't the ones that destroy bodies. They're the ones that shatter minds. And once you understand how to use them, you can never forget that knowledge. It stays with you, in the quiet moments in the darkness, reminding you that sometimes survival means becoming the thing that others fear most. I survived those 18 hours in the Zagros Mountains, but part of me is still there in that valley, listening to the echoes of what I unleashed, and I'll carry that sound until the day I die.